The feed came alive like a pulse through the command terminal, a thin green line across the map that meant movement, life, a vulnerability. At 0742, Kiev's little control room was a hive of low voices and clipped commands. The monitors glowed, coffee went cold. Every screen was a window into someone else's morning. Train track 2, Marta said, not looking up. Her finger hovered above the tactical overlay. Telemetry spike. Civilian clearance shows a gap at 0.8 euros. Across the room, Lieutenant Ivan tuned the acoustic filter. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and whispered, almost to himself, "They still think the rails are safe." Outside, dawn unrolled over a sleepier landscape. Inside, the team was wide awake. They had watched the convoy for days, schedules logged, station GSM chatter cross-checked, satellite images layered over old timetables. Every predictable rhythm of logistics had become a thread in the net they'd woven. Today, someone would step into it. "Confirm target composition," the brigade analyst said. Her voice was steady, but the numbers on her screen shifted like the tide. Large liquid cargo. Aviation and diesel permutations on board. Priority? Disrupt. Don't collateralize the nearby village, Marta answered. She tasted the words the way a chef tastes soup. Exact and precise. For the drones, small, fast, and quiet, the world resolved into shapes. Heat signatures, metallic silhouettes, a ribbon of rail across a field. I rode on one of those feeds. The sky was a hard blue. My sensors painted the morning in gradients of heat and shadow. From above the tree line, the train looked like a slow-moving promise. Weight, momentum, a long bright thread of metal and steel under the sun. 3 units ready, called Pavel from the aft console. Targeting, strike, overwatch. Keep comms sparse, Ivan said. EM clutter's been heavy in the corridor since last week. We push, we pull back, no heroics. Time is a different thing when you measure it in seconds. In the command room, minutes were sliced into breath lengths. On the rail, the train kept its steady pace. The crews inside were human. They hummed to their own routines, unaware that the shape of their day was changing. At 0759, the first drone slipped off its rail-mounted cradle like a moth from a jar. I felt the climb, the tilt, the calculative steadying. As it rose, the ground shrinking into geometry. Below, the wheat stitched itself into patterns. The world became vectors, and vectors became decisions. Visual lock, Marta said. Range steady. Confirmation. Target is on schedule. In position, Pavel replied. Signal backup online. If they try EM denial, we'll switch to passive feed. Above the tree line, the morning air smelled of burnt oil and dust. The first drone moved into a targeting pattern, while the second drew a few hundred meters out, a patient dog waiting to sprint. The third hung higher, a distant eye. On the train, the 14th wagon was innocent in a way that makes violence cruel. Just steel and seams and a human crew that trusted the timetable. I watched my feed narrow as the drone aligned its approach, the ground coming into focus like the eye of a camera lens. "Hold," Ivan breathed, and the room inhaled with him. When they released, it was not with the fury of a thunderbolt, but with surgical choreography. The first strike hit where it had to. A precise impact that turned cargo into a catalyst. The flare was instant, a bloom of light, a terrible, beautiful bloom that painted faces and fields in orange. For a moment, the world was nothing but heat and light and the low metal groan of suffering steel. "Fireball confirmed," the analyst said. Her voice was flat, the tone of someone who understands both victory and loss. Secondary ignition, chain reaction commencing. The second wave came like punctuation. A pair of small shapes folding into the rear of the convoy, each strike measured to amplify rather than merely to destroy. Metal shrieked, couplings snapped, and the train, once a single organism in motion, split like a broken spine. Concrete sleepers buckled under a fevered heat. Black smoke climbed into the blue and turned the morning into an instant of history. "Distance from nearest settlement?" a voice asked. 1,400 meters, Marta answered. "No casualties reported on approach routes. Local comms are down." Down on the line, the world of human responders folded into confusion. Russian guards scrambled for phones that chimed into silence. Electromagnetic interference hung in the air like a static fog. For 12 long minutes, the rails lay in a kind of stunned silence. Fires ate themselves into the metal, radios were mute, and the first units that could have helped were kept at bay by weather the fire made. From above, my sensors mapped the aftermath. The wreckage was an anatomical diagram. Twisted steel, scattered debris, a cratered spine where the train had been. Thermal overlays pulsed in slow beats. Pockets of heat traced the memory of combustion. I watched as UAVs in our Overwatch passed data back and forth. Their feeds a conversation of numbers and frames and cold, clear assessment. We've lost 300 meters of double track, the analyst said. Signaling lines fried. Estimated repair window, days. In practice, Ivan murmured, it's a logistics blackout. And that's what it was. Not merely a blow to rolling stock, but a disruption of time and expectation. Fuel meant sorties. It meant armored columns. It meant the execution of plans that depended on a reliable supply chain. With that spine snapped, decisions had to be remade. Convoys rerouted, helicopters grounded, 1,000 small operations were quietly pushed into limbo. The cost calculus flickered through the room like a scoreboard. Small, expendable platforms had created a strategic paralysis that rippled through command centers and field units alike. On the cheap end of the ledger sat 7 drones and a few operators. On the other, days of delay, ruptured supply lines, and a psychological fracture. An infrastructure once assumed secure no longer was. For hours after, operators sifted through drone footage, annotating, confirming, comparing. A message was drafted for release, a sanitized, formal statement to the world that reads like the cold bones of statecraft. Yet, as the analysts traced smoke plumes and dynamically reassessed enemy movement, another thread pulled at their attention. Something on the northern approaches had shifted. Satellite shows movement, the analyst said. Armored trucks, columns forming on tertiary roads. Not purely resupply, maybe a countermeasure. Pavel's fingers hovered. Are we seeing a force buildup or a feint? Too early to be sure. Composition is mixed. Logistics vehicles, protected trucks, at least, she replied. But their routing suggests an attempt to exploit our concentration. If they pivot, they could push through before full repair. Or they could be bait. In the silence, every possibility felt like the edge of a blade. The team's mood shifted from triumph to anticipation. The operation had achieved what it set out to do. But war, in its stubbornness, does not stop at success. It asks questions and forces answers the moment you least expect them. Outside, along the scarred rail, smoke still curled into the afternoon. Local crews in military rigs shuffled toward the site under escort. Drones, their missions spent, drifted home like exhausted birds. In the command room, the screens rotated fresh overlays. Supply choke points, rerouted roads, thermal trails of vehicle movement. Ivan looked at the map and then at the team. We gave them a taste of vulnerability, he said, voice low. Now we wait to see how they swallow it. Marta tapped a notification. We've got contact chatter on frequency 9, intermittent. They're scrambling reconnaissance drones of their own. Pavel's smile was thin. Let them fly. We're watching their shadows now. The last frames from my sensor froze on a convoy moving under the tree line. A question in motion. Were they relief units, a counterattack, or a probe to test a new choke point? The answer would write the next sequence of moves. The rail was broken, yes, but broken rails can be fixed. Minds that have been forced to react can reorganize. The balance had shifted but not been decided. In the quiet that followed, the command room fell into an uneasy rhythm. Assess, plan, anticipate. The screens would continue to glow. Drones would be readied. Analysts would parse chatter into meaning. On the other side of the front, engineers and commanders would be arguing over priorities. The train lay ruined, and the tracks were a black scar. For 6 days, the line would be unusable. For however long it lasted, the front would adjust and adapt. And beyond that, questions hung like ember smoke in the air. Would adversaries pour resources into hardening the rail network? Would they attempt a rapid counter-mobilization through the north? Or would this spark a series of calculated probes and counter-probes that would redraw supply lines across an entire theater? The feed stuttered as a new thermal trail appeared on the map. A thin ribbon from the north. The camera zoomed in and the convoy became more than an icon. It became intent. COP approaching from grid 7, the analyst said. Estimated time to intercept, 3 hours. Ivan exhaled. Then we planned for 3 hours. Outside, the smoke did not tell who would win. It only promised that the next act had already begun. The hours that followed were not silence, but waiting. The kind of waiting that hums beneath the skin like static. Kiev's control room stayed lit, its walls alive with shifting maps and coded chatter. Every keystroke was a beat, every overlay a pulse. By 10:20, the northern ribbon of movement had grown teeth. Satellite returns sharpened, armored trucks in staggered formation, electronic warfare vehicles nestled between fuel carriers, and at least 2 mobile batteries of short-range SAMs. They're not just patching holes, the analyst whispered, eyes fixed on her monitor. They're bracing for more. Ivan leaned forward, elbows on the console. Which means they think there will be more. Marta swiveled in her chair. Counteroffensive posture, or decoy? Either way, Ivan said. They're moving faster than rail repair crews can dream of. Outside, the convoy was a scar through the countryside. Engines groaned, wheels pounded dust into the air. Villages watched them pass. Curtains twitched, old men leaned on fences, children pointed at silhouettes they did not yet understand. The soldiers inside those trucks sat with rifles across their laps, helmets bumping against steel walls. The drones watching from above were invisible ghosts, shadows stretching across the landscape. One orbited higher than clouds, relaying heat signatures like heartbeat patterns. Another skimmed the tree line, its feed grainy but clear enough. The white bloom of engines, the faint shimmer of metal under tarp. Composition verified, Pavel said. Not just fuel. They've got something heavier. What kind of heavier? Ivan asked without looking away from the map. Could be air defense radar. Could be mobile artillery, Pavel muttered. They're hiding their teeth under the wagons. The control room darkened as satellite overlays adjusted, fresh data cascading across screens. Each icon wasn't just a vehicle, it was intent. Each route wasn't just a line, it was possibility. At 11:06, the first hint of their plan surfaced. The convoy pivoted east, abandoning the shortest road south toward the rail scar. Instead, they threaded into narrower arteries, country roads with old culverts and broken asphalt. They're not stupid, Marta said softly. They're avoiding obvious choke points. Which means, Ivan replied, they're headed for something we don't see yet. The analyst zoomed in. Secondary depot, 23 kilometers from strike site. If they re-establish there, they bypass the blackout in 2 days. Ivan's jaw tightened. Too soon. The room inhaled, the weight of decision pressing like a storm front. Drones could strike again, but risked exposure to jammers and SAMs. Letting the convoy pass could mean losing the advantage bought that morning with precision fire and silence. War was mathematics written in human risk. By 11:20, chatter on frequency 9 spiked. Scrambled phrases, half-coded, half-panicked, cut through static. Marta translated on the fly. Fuel priority, immediate transfer, security perimeter, reconnaissance drones inbound. They're trying to patch the artery before it bleeds out, Pavel said. Ivan stood, finally, the only movement breaking the trance of screens. We don't hit convoys without clarity. We shadow them. Watch. Wait. The analyst hesitated. And if they set up before nightfall? Then, Ivan answered, voice flat. We rewrite nightfall. Above the countryside, clouds began to form. The drones drifted in patient arcs, recording, feeding, calculating. On the ground, the convoy pushed toward its hidden purpose. In Kiev's control room, the air was taut, a bowstring drawn but not yet loosed. The morning strike had snapped a spine. The next move would decide if the wound deepened into paralysis or healed into resilience. And in the quiet between chatter and static, one truth pressed in. Victory was never the explosion, never the bloom of light. It was what came after. The choices made in the smoke.